How's it going, everyone? Good. Thank you so much for sticking out. Long weekend, I know, and we're at Monday, so thank you for coming out. And this is the game study, the educational power of video games panel. And I'm curious, do we have any educators or anyone who uses games in any kind of capacity? Teachers, librarians, therapists, psychologists, anyone who does cool stuff, educational stuff with video games. Nice.
Raise them up high, take some pride in the word.
Yeah.
There it is.
Parents count. Parents
Yes,
count.
parents
count too.
Beautiful.
Property is important.
All right, so I'm Zack Hartzman. I'm going to be moderating this panel for you all, and let's do a couple of introductions. All right, I'm going to let my panelists go first. So why don't we start down at that end?
Hello, my name is Harry Loizides. I am a high school math teacher on Long Island, New York. So yay, New York. Yeah, there's more than one. So I have been teaching in the classroom this is my 8th year. And pretty much since the beginning, I've tried to implement some sort of meaningful purpose with video games as well as what I teach in my multitude of classes, from algebra to geometry to business math to game theory to other electives and other required classes. What I have noticed over the years as an educator, sorry, this is okay then. Okay, just making sure.
I want you to ramble as much as you want.
Okay. The thing that I've noticed during my years of education is you always want to have a purpose behind what you're doing. Video games is fun, period. We all know that. But if I want to use it and implement it into classroom environments or into social emotional learning or other avenues that will allow me to use it while being a teacher, I need to have some logic behind it, especially since some people who are older than me, some are much older than me, don't really get what video games are. So if you're able to rationalize it, and we'll probably talk about that more in detail during this panel, that's the big takeaway from it. In addition to being a math teacher by day, I also write and am a contributor to 61 Indie, which is an indies website that amplifies the games that indie creators make to amplify their voices. And as an educator, I've also been awarded the 10 Under 10 Young Alumni Award from Adelphi University. That's my alma mater, where they kind of every year they showcase 10 young alumni. So from year 1 to year 10 post-graduation of who's made positive contributions to the community. So that was a nice little humble brag from me.
You got a nice monetary award with that, right?
Yeah, it was a whopping $0. But the recognition's nice, so it was very appreciative, and kind of blew my brain when they sent me that email being like, "You're a winner." I'm like, "No, I'm not." So that was a little bit of imposter syndrome, but I was just happy that I can shine some voices on what I do in the classroom as well as what I do outside the classroom.
Hi everyone, I'm Amelia Herbst. I am a therapeutic game master and therapist at Game to Grow. For those of you that haven't heard of Game to Grow is a national nonprofit that is based here in the Seattle area that does therapeutic Dungeons and Dragons games, therapeutic Minecraft games, and now we have an individual clinic where there's a few of us seeing geeks and gamers online for therapy. Game to Grow believes that games of all kind can be used for therapeutic, educational, and community growth. So pretty much all of us are total nerds, and when we have clients that are total nerds and total geeks, it's just like, let's talk about this. So for me, I like using video games in therapy. I think your video game interests, your anime interests, anything that really brings you passion should be used in therapy, because why not? If you really like one certain anime because one character really stands out to you, or if you like playing one video game because it really makes you feel powerful in other areas of your life where you don't feel as powerful, why not? So that's why I work for Games to Grow. That's why I think they're great. Otherwise, I am the community manager of Geeks Like Us. So pretty much I am perpetually putting out fires. I am connecting with people in the community. And I'm trying to keep the roundtable in line, except for Zach. Zach's normally the one person I don't have to worry about.
I don't do anything wrong. I'm a good boy.
So I'm Shane Tilton. I'm an associate professor at Ohio Northern University, which is in Ada, Ohio. Ada, Ohio is known for really 3 things. Ohio Northern University, we've got a great Mexican restaurant, El Campo, and we make all the footballs for the NFL. My background is I actually do game research. In 2015, I did a scholarly work on how to use social deception games. By the way, give me a thumbs up if you're familiar with social deception games like Werewolf, Mafia, Battlestar, okay, fair enough. It was one of the first ones that was focused on the particular aspects of how social deception games can be used in a classroom setting, which allowed me to actually become the vice chair for the Game Studies Division for the National Communication Association, and I'm just a huge fan of applying games into the classroom setting. So, that's it.
Also, before I introduce myself, this was a panel that I actually did during PAX Online with two other educators, Mike Washburn and Steve Isaacs, who I want to shout out. Because originally, it was the three of us again, but then due to various COVID things, they weren't able to make it. So these three stepped up pretty last minute to come join me on this panel. So I just want to shout out these three for doing that. All right, so I'm Zack Hartzman. I'm a high school social studies and ELA teacher in New York City, specifically in the Bronx. The school I teach at is Ellis Preparatory Academy. It's a unique school. It is a public school, but we are an international transfer school. So my school is a 100% immigrant English language learner population, and most of which are overage. So I currently teach 11th and 12th grade, and my seniors can sometimes get up to 23, 24 years old, because as long as they're under 21 when they get here, they're allowed to enroll in 9th grade. So when I did teach 9th grade, I sometimes, the youngest really, we would get kind of 16-year-olds, but up to 20. I remember my first year teaching, I was 23. I had a 22-year-old in my classroom, and every single day without fail, he's just like, yo, mister, we're going drinking after this, right? No, we can't. And the nature of the school that I work at, I'm always looking for cool ways to engage with language, specifically because a lot of them have never spoken English before, so they need, and we have state exams that they need to pass in English in order to graduate. So for a while, I would use movies, TV, comics, just different ways to get them grappling with language. And since all those things went really well, I was like, I'm also passionate about video games, so I started bringing video games into my classroom. And the moment I started to do that, I went online to look for resources, like lesson plans and handouts and just other things teachers were doing, and I found nothing. Just doesn't exist, right? If I want to find a lesson plan for teaching with like some popular movies, I can find that pretty easily, but when it came to video games, it's just not out there. So when I went and told my principal that I want to use video games, she's like, okay, show me the lesson plan. What are your outcomes? What are the standards you're hitting? What are the essential questions? All that stuff. So I just started making my own constantly, and as I talked to more educators about it, they're like, that's really cool. Can you share what you've got? So a little over 2 years ago now, I founded Hey Listen Games, which is my website where all of my curriculum, it's like 47 different lessons and activities worth, is up there for free. So you just go, you have to sign in, but like all my lesson plans, all the student handouts, all the slides that I use, they're all on my website, Hey Listen Games. They're completely for free because I know teachers, we don't make a lot of money, so I'm not going to charge you for anything. Although sometimes people do donate and support me on Patreon, but everything's there for free. And because of my work at Hey Listen Games, I was also chosen as part of the future class at this most recent Game Awards. The Game Awards run by Jeff Keighley. It was a group of 50 people from around the world who are diversifying the gaming art form and using games in unique ways. And my wife told me she was going to nominate me for it. She submitted the application. I was like, there's no way they're going to choose me. I'm not in the industry. I'm just a teacher. And I was one of the people who was chosen. It was super cool. And like most of the other people in that group are people in the industry, right? So I'm really one of the few outsiders that got chosen for it, which is really, really cool. And then, not there at the moment, but I am also at Geeks Like Us with Amelia. I do a weekly stream where I play the games that I have taught with or plan on teaching with and just give commentary about how and why I'm using these games in my classroom, which is a lot of fun, so you should come stop by.
And you've got a book coming out with Geek
Yes.
Therapeutics.
Thank you for the plug. All right, so Shane, who's at Geek Therapeutics.
I'm one of the advisory board members, so we basically, to do a quick plug for that, Geek Therapeutics basically helps mental health professionals get the resources they need to use geek culture in therapeutic settings. But Zack has written or is in the process of finishing a wonderful book that basically deals with some of those aspects that we're going to be doing today.
Yes, and there's also a Geek Therapeutics booth, which if you haven't gone there yet, go say hi to Tony
Mm.
afterwards. Tony's a great guy. He's a licensed psychologist dealing with kind of a lot of these same topics and themes. So go say hi to him and tell him I said hi. Because and I want to preface, if you want to talk to me, I apologize. This ends at 1:30. My flight is at 3:41. I got to haul ass the second that this ends, so I can't stay after and answer questions, but I will have contact information for you all, and I'm very good at responding. All right? So we are going to play a game today. We're going to play a game that I love to teach with. But before we do that, I want to just do a quick round robin of an example of a game, video game or not, that you've done with your students or with your clients, and like why you did it and how it went.
Okay. So I love using games in the classroom, so that's been always my biggest push. My favorite game to use in the classroom, I teach a class in layout design, and how many of you are familiar with A Fake Artist Goes to New York? Okay, so it's an amazing game because the premise of the game is basically it's a party game, so you'll have anywhere from 4 to 10 people, and essentially someone is the expert, and they ask their group to draw an image. It could be an animal, it could be a building, it could be whatever, and basically they'll write that same word down to everyone except one who gets an X. That X is a fake artist, and then the master basically lets their players go around one at a time and draw one line at a time, and they have to figure out who the fake artist is. And part of the reason I like using that is because I teach in layout design this idea called Gestalt theory. Gestalt theory has some of the components that help us make good design, and we talk about how your creation sort of either you knew what you were drawing or you had to guess what you're drawing, how the lines and the construction help you build that. So that's one of the areas I think is really useful about games, is that it allows you to expand the concepts of what you're teaching in class and apply it in a reasonably easy manner.
Cool.
So I have two go-tos. Clearly, I'm a therapeutic game master, so I use Dungeons and Dragons, but I'm going to put that to the side. The two video games that I like to use in particular are both RPGs. One is The Witcher 3, because, yes, thank you. One of the reasons is even though my clients aren't necessarily able to explore their identity through The Witcher, because you're playing as Geralt, one of the excellent things that The Witcher can do is to challenge your emotions when you choose a particular answer that you think is going to be positive, and then he completely flips it on you. This is an excellent conversation about, like, how did that feel when he decided to flip that on you? Sometimes we say things that we don't necessarily realize is negative, and then it ends up hurting someone else's feelings. So how do we rectify this now? Are we going to interact with this character in a different way later on down the line? How does it feel to try to be like the good, positive Geralt through all of this, and then have one moment where you slip up and then feel like, oh no, I completely ruined this entire interaction, and kind of having like the conversation around social skills and the feelings attached to that. The second one is almost any RPG in which you can explore your identity. The one that I really like to use is Skyrim, because you can quite literally be whoever you want in Skyrim. So if this is a person that they are thinking about transitioning, they know in their heart of hearts that's what they want to do. They don't know what that's going to look like. They don't know what it's going to be like wandering around a world where instead of being called he, him, they're called she, her. So being able to use something like Skyrim where they can create their identity, act out their identity, and process the feelings attached to it, it's like a world of difference, especially for some clients that are really gun shy with that.
I've started The Witcher 3 like 5 times, and every time I get like 6 hours in, I'm like, I can't do it. It's another open world RPG. I need to like have a dry spell of open world games before I can dive into a game like The Witcher 3.
I've never played The Witcher 3 because I'm horrified I'm going to get lost and have a panic and want to do everything and be 300 hours in and haven't started the main story yet. So
Join me.
Yeah. No, I can't. I'm too scared. But I'm also going to skirt the one rule, and I'm going to use 2 examples. One is one I did not talk about. I could.
Do it. Do it.
Do it.
All right. Okay. We're going to play it like that. So the first one is one I actually forgot to talk about in my first panel on Friday, so that was my bad. So sorry, people who didn't hear about that. But similar to what Amelia was saying, Dungeons and Dragons is a wonderful, simple to modify and mold into something that you want. So when I teach geometry, especially more specifically coordinate geometry with an x-y axis and grids, to me that's like an easy shoehorn where you can, instead of talking about the perimeter of a garden with a stone that has to be equidistant from two of the other stones, which is a real Regents question, our state assessment, I can modify it to there's two orcs, and you need to use a fireball or it's fireball, right?
Fireball.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
fireball.
Yeah.
You nailed it.
Sorry, I just leveled up in my D&D game, so I'm trying to remember all the spells because I'm a sorcerer. With a radius of X amount of feet, will it attack the two orcs? Then you have to justify your reasoning. So all of that is just the same content, but with a skin of D&D to kind of either elicit more deeper thinking, get students who might not be confident with their math, and it gives them a point of context that they'll feel comfortable talking about, or it's just something different than just talking about the same 4 types of archetypes that most of the assessments are just kind of shoehorning in themselves. But the other example that I'd like to talk about is probability, which is can range wildly from 7th grade math all the way up to AP stats. So one of the projects I really started doing last year, and I'm probably going to do again this year, is giving students the freedom of choice to research their own game, whether it be tabletop or video game or card game, and then make an analysis of the probability of that game. So the one that I usually go to with Pokemon, as you can see from my picture, I like Pokemon. And I did the attack probability of the attack Thunder in Pokemon Blue, which has a 70% chance. So I would do that over I would do it multiple times. So 1 time, 5 times, 25 times, 50 times, 100 times, and then kind of analyze the theoretical probability versus the experimental probability and see whether or not it was similar, whether it adjusted itself the more times you did it, which was more of a 7th grade topic because the complexity wasn't there. But last year, since I was doing upper level math with a bunch of high school students, I did conditionals and conjunction and disjunctions, like what's the probability of it hitting twice? What's the probability of it hitting exactly 3 times out of 5 times? What's the probability of hitting at least twice? Or at most 4 times. So making it still Regents level computations and analysis, but in a skin that the students can be more interested in. My example was Pokemon. Some students did Fortnite with the loot probability, whether it was like an epic item, common item, other levels which I don't remember, as well as Fire Emblem Heroes, which I thought was a big surprise because I thought that game was like dead. And then Genshin Impact, which was the most popular one, second to Fortnite. So that I had a lot of fun with. And like I said, you want to find the purpose behind it. Students who understood the purpose did really well on the unit for probability. And then we said go for 3?
Go for 3.
Okay, the third one, which I really like talking about, is the original Super Mario Brothers game where Mario jumps. So he's running, he jumps, and then he falls down, which is a parabola curve for my math people. So measuring out the time it takes while the height creates the parabola, and the students didn't believe me, so we had to slow-mo it. And then they kind of saw it and were like, oh my God, it's so cool. I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, that's why we're doing it. So kind of getting them thinking about, like I said, the topics in a different context. Because sometimes it's hard to find a full-blown game. It's like, let's talk about math the entire time, which is very difficult. But if I'm able to pinpoint a specific thing, it makes it much more relatable, and the students have a lot more invested into it. And plus, I try to do as many free games as possible because money is tight for everyone.
Can I just say I'm fascinated by this? Just this whole explanation about math and use of video games, and I'm like, I use video games to talk about feelings.
Yeah, social emotional learning is super important, so
I appreciate that reframe. Thank you.
And math is not important.
We're
never going to use
You're going to miss your flight because you're going to be in the hospital.
Well, just to pile on, in our discipline, math is a 4-letter word.
Correct?
Yep. Curse word.
There
you go. All right.
Well.
Now, I'm putting you on the spot. They gave multiple examples.
Okay,
Give
so
another
coming
one.
back in.
Yeah,
Okay,
we're
so
throwing hands, right?
beyond, I know we'll throw hands later, it'll be fine. All right, so beyond using Werewolf, one of the games I like to use is a newer game called News at 9 because essentially I teach journalism and News at 9, and there's News at 9 and there's Breaking News. They both do the same thing, and that is sort of like it's a Mad Lib story creation, and we talk about essentially how the story process is developed. So it's not unusual for me to say, okay, we're going to use this game, and oh, by the way, now you've got to write a new story using the prompts and the assets that you have to tell the story. And it helps me really develop it as more of a simulation of writing. And that's the one area that I think games work well in my area, is that it's very difficult to have students write news stories on the fly so I can assess them in a reasonable manner. Some of the games that are out there allow storytelling concepts that are really parallel to what we would use in journalism, and they are effective to actually sort of think about the process of crafting stories, because I think that's the one area that games do really well. That's the development of stories through this medium that allows for interactivity.
Cool. All right, so I won't talk too much at length, because if you go to Hey Listen Games, my website, I have 47 different games that I have taught with that you should all go check out. But I'm going to use two examples. One is I've taught with one board game. And a point of growth for me is to start using more tabletop in my own teaching, because I don't play so much tabletop in just my personal life. I play tons and tons of video games. But every other year I teach economics. And one of the units I made is using Monopoly, where I altered the rules of the game depending on whichever economic system we were playing. And then I bought 5 boards, so my students were working in groups. We'll see if I can do that this year, because COVID's kind of changed how we all do our jobs. But I altered the rules based on if we were doing capitalism, socialism, or communism. And they were so into it. It was so cool to just see them excited, especially for like students. So like when I say I did capitalism, we didn't all start on like an even playing field, kind of how you're supposed to in Monopoly. I had the 1%. So like there were students who started with a ton of money, right? And then I had different classes already embedded into it, and then they played it with that set of rules and applied it to like their own experiences or just capitalism at large, and taking into account other things like gender and race as well. And then similar, altering rules for socialism and communism. And it was super cool. And for economics, I'm teaching economics again this year, and another classic board game I'm going to try and use, I haven't done it yet, so I'll let you all know how it goes, is the Game of Life, where we're doing a whole unit on personal finance, and we're going to play the Game of Life and have them critique the game about how well it actually displays personal finance, like financial choices that we all go through in life. So I'm super excited about that. Then, my favorite game to teach in my I also teach U.S. history. My U.S. history class each year is the video game Papers, Please. I know, right? And for anyone who doesn't know, Papers, Please is it's like a puzzle game, but you play as a border patrol agent in a fictional country. And it's set during like a refugee crisis, and people come up to you, they give you their papers, that's why it's called Papers, Please. You examine them, and then you stamp pretty much yes or no, you can come into the country. And I always teach this in a unit on immigration. And it's so much better, not better, but like it's so cool with my students because all of my students are immigrants themselves, all right? And the nature of that is that it's almost always like evenly split down the middle. Half the kids are just like super empathetic, and they're like, oh, yeah, no, come in, I don't care. Don't worry what your papers say, just come in, it's fine. And then other students are like, it took me 12 years to get here. No, right, constantly, and then they debate about those choices that they made. So I love doing that every single year. If you haven't played it, I recommend this game. It's just really wonderful.
It's free too. Am I correct on that?
There's a free demo of it.
Right.
The developer did make another game called The Republia Times, which is free, which I also love to use. That game is you manipulate the headlines of a newspaper for a fictional country, and your goal is to sow loyalty among the populace. But then a rebellion gets in contact with you, and they want you to sow disloyalty. So it's all about how the news and media shapes public perception of the government. Highly recommend that as well.
Terrifying.
Definitely terrifying.
It's a little too hard.
But that game is free, which is great, and it's playable on web browsers, so you don't actually need to buy anything. Or like, I have a class set of Chromebooks, which suck, but I can play web browser games on it. And then I have my social studies classes, but then I also teach an elective ELA class, and we specifically do video games as literature. All right, and we're doing all the same skills that students learn in their like normal ELA classes, but we apply those skills to video games. All right, and my favorite game to do every single year in this class is What Remains of Edith Finch. All right, does anyone know What Remains of Edith Finch? Have you all played? Have you played it? You guys played it? So this is one of my favorite games of all time. Definitely, it was like one of the best games of the past 10 years. And Edith Finch, I use this game because it's super accessible. It's a walking sim, so all you do is kind of walk around and just let the story happen. Like interact with a couple of things, but the controls are not demanding by any means. Which, for many of my students who have never held a controller or mouse and keyboard controls in their lives, it doesn't take too long for them to learn how to play the game, because if you've never held a controller before, picking one up and trying to figure out what they do, especially like dual analog sticks or what controls the camera and what controls the player, is daunting. So it's a great game to start off with for any teacher, I think. And when I use this game, we are looking at the various literary elements and rhetorical devices that are used in the game. So Harry mentioned the Regents exam for math. So on the English side of that, we have the Regents exam for English language arts. And it's only available in English. And one of the prompts on this exam is to read a text, come up with the central idea of the text, and then talk about one literary element or rhetorical device that the author used in that text. And that's things like conflict, point of view, irony, setting, tone, mood, all of that. And so I teach them those same skills, but instead of reading a text, we play What Remains of Edith Finch and then do the same thing. And in doing so, I've had students who just like refuse to write pages. And I have one of my classic examples, a student named Danny, who actually came with me on a panel at PAX East 2020 before everything shut down, talking about his experiences with this game. And now he's gone on and got a full ride to a game development program at a private university. Right? Yeah, he would not write. He passed his English Regents exam without completing the final essay on it.
What?
Because there's a multiple choice section and an essay section. And if you get all of them right on the multiple choice section, you can pass. So he just got them all and then fell asleep, not knowing that he did it, that they were all correct, but he passed the exam without doing the essay, right? And we're like, okay, so you passed, but we want you to go to a good university. You're going to take it again. You're going to take my class so that we can actually get you excited about writing. And then he went up like 10 points. He didn't write the greatest essay on the thing, but he did get a grade that was suitable for the colleges that he was actually interested in applying to.
Yeah, and
Right.
showing growth as a student is the goal.
Yes, he actually picked himself up, sat in the corner of the room during my final assessment, and started writing so that there were no distractions. And if anyone, I know you don't all know Danny, but like, that was an accomplishment. I taught that kid for 4 years, and that was not something I had ever seen before. All right, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to play some What Remains of Edith Finch. All right, now I know the three of us have played it. Shane's played a little, but because he hasn't played the whole game, he's going to be the player, and we're just going to play it so that you can see it. You can see how kind of crazy this game is, and we'll just talk about how I have used it or how we would use it in our various practices. Something I do beforehand is that this game does deal with themes of death and suicide, so I just always put that warning out beforehand, especially when I teach it with my students. Because if they don't want to, I let them always. I've never had a student do it, but I allow students to remove themselves from the room if they feel the need to.
Grief and trauma as well, just in case anyone needs those warnings as well.
All right, Shane, you ready?
Yes, sir.
So something else that I think is really important too is you don't have to shoot for the $60 game for every game you want to present to your students. The games that Zach mentioned, a lot of them are free or minimal cost. So that's another thing you bring back to your schools and your administrators as another incentive to kind of bridge the gap between disinterest and interest.
Yeah, and definitely think about length. I never, like, people always ask me about teaching with Assassin's Creed. I'm like, no, that game's 50 hours long. I'm not teaching with Assassin's Creed. What Remains of Edith Finch? 3 hours. I could find 3 hours of class time to teach with What Remains of Edith Finch.
Yeah. and also keep in mind the limitations of your students' technology at home. So I think Zach often does playing the game in the classroom to
I
make
do,
sure
yeah.
everyone's on the same foot.
I like to play together like this, where usually I have a student playing and then they rotate as needed.
I'm a therapist, so I have as much time as my client wants.
That's nice.
I have 41 minutes a day.
All right, let's see if Shane.
only gives me half hour.
What?
In this very first scene, I immediately say, think of foreshadowing, because it is foreshadowing something, but I won't tell you what.
Very good observation.
You can do it. Click and play it.
Click and drag.
There
Goal
you
is to
go.
open. There we go.
There's supposed to be sound, right?
Yeah, I thought she was supposed to be talking.
It was sound on the board.
Would we be able to check on that?
Did the sound disappear?
Yes, it did.
She's supposed to talk. That's why we're sitting here.
Yeah.
Like,
That's interesting. It's all up.
Someone get unplugged?
Well, that's very strange that we heard the music.
We heard the music initially.
yeah, it is weird that we heard the music, but we didn't hear her talking.
It could have just got unplugged.
Well, that's okay. We're all having a great time here.
This happens every time I teach, also. So, welcome to the experience.
We're life
Oh
in
shit,
the
that's
case
right.
part.
So how do it might be on the HDMI.
What's up?
The audio's back on the HDMI, I think. That's why you said I
Can we just unplug that?
Yeah. Be sure to hit that bell.
Oh, tab, that's right, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's
There we go.
Hey.
Cool.
Yay.
We're back in business. Thank you.
Thank you.
Clap.
I lived here until I was 11, but I wasn't allowed inside half the rooms.
One thing that I really like about this game too is that there's often text as well as the audio. So if someone's visually impaired or audio impaired, it kind of gives you the best of both worlds.
So whenever you see the change, turn around.
I hadn't been back since my brother Lewis's funeral.
Ooh, look at the mailbox. Whenever you see one of those white dots, that means you can interact with it.
Inside the mailbox were bills from 7 years ago, marked urgent, open immediately.
There you go. Keep them.
Back?
And I do love how subtitles are like embedded into the actual game and interact with the environments. What's that?
See, this is great because I forgot. My wife says the best things are found behind the signs of saying no
In a
trespassing,
row,
so.
my mother left
good.
me a key, but didn't tell me what it unlocked.
Maybe that's more foreshadowing.
Maybe she thought
I
I'd
did it for
know.
prediction.
Ah, okay.
Or-
Sorry.
She
Make
thought
a prediction
the
what's the
mystery
key
would be
used
enough to
for.
bring back.
Sorry, I'm the math guy.
So one of the ways to look at this from a therapeutic standpoint is to think about how certain families deal with their own grief. Through this entire game, including here from the very beginning, we learn that she hasn't been back since her brother's funeral. And in a lot of cases,
No one had driven this
sometimes
way in a long time,
I
but
feel
I
bad.
saw a few hoof prints.
I feel bad talking over her. Her mom, the grief of losing her brother was so extreme that she took Edith away and chose to not return to this house in which Edith grew up. And that's one way of dealing with grief, is attempting to avoid entirely and backing away to try to heal in another place instead.
So the main premise of the game is that, like Amelia said, Edith has not been back to this house in a long time. And everyone in her family has passed away for one reason or another. She's the last
The truth
remaining
is,
member of the Finch family
Even after I
because
inherited
of
the
a
house,
family curse.
I never thought I'd come back to it.
And actually, Shane, 1
But
second.
now I had questions about my family that only the house knew the answers to.
And in the start menu is actually a family tree of all the members in the family. And as you go, she draws in each of them. But you can already see the years of when each person was born and when each person died.
And it could be a cool lineage or like a timepiece for each person too, like the 70s, the 1800s, and kind of compare those to each other as well.
I think the one thing I appreciate about actually being the player is that you feel like you're driving the discussion of the class. So even if you're someone that doesn't normally talk, which happens a
The
lot.
house was exactly like I remembered it, the way I'd been dreaming about it.
it's a great way for learning to interact.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like participation doesn't only mean verbalizing.
As a child, the house made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't put into words.
I can put it into words. Look at that thing. Look at it.
Look at it!
Look at it. That children are up there. Lived up there.
All the way up at the top.
Yeah, so that was their house, which is
Now,
wild.
as a 17-year-old,
Yeah,
I knew exactly what those words were.
yeah.
I was afraid of the house.
I don't think it would have gotten approved by the city to build, but
And fun fact, this game is supposed to take place here in northern Washington State.
Yep. Dan, I want you to walk up to the fence there.
Oh, you get there?
You see that little circle?
I do indeed. Is it faster?
Can you get closer to it?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh, usually you can see through it.
I do.
You can kind of see through it.
There you go.
Okay, they sit down.
oh, it's a swing.
I have them look at the swing and have them think about what is going on with that swing. Especially when it comes to game design, everything's intentional, right? So you being able to see that swing through this little eyepiece that they put there has a purpose. So I like to have my students, again, like, it is foreshadowing something, and I have my students predict about what's going on with this swing.
I think the one thing I like narratively is basically this is where you can start writing those prompts. You can start thinking, what will that swing actually, what would we expect to see, and start writing about it. So that could be a great place to start. Let me go back. Let's go ahead and go back to the door.
Yep.
Actually, the stairs. This is the part where I always miss the stairs.
Crawling through the doggy door used to be a lot easier when I was 11.
Also, I learned something that was culturally relevant to specifically me and not my students, but maybe it is to all of you. You see that tennis ball hanging?
Mm-hmm.
My students had no idea what that was. All right, but
What
my
is it for?
my grandparents have a tennis ball hanging in their garage.
I
So
have one in my garage too.
so who can tell us what it's for? Yeah.
It's how close you can pull forward before you hit something in your garage.
Exactly, right? So in my grandparents' garage, like the second that ball is right by the windshield, they know not to go any further in the garage.
I'll be honest, I never noticed that, and I still don't understand what that is.
You don't want to crash into the wall.
Yeah.
Or the
I don't want to do any
buttons, or
damage
the
to my
boxes.
wall.
You know what? I'll Google this later, but we can just keep going.
Okay.
Remind me that you let you drive my car in my garage. Okay, it's good to know. Good to know.
Tennis ball.
Interesting there.
Huh.
Ooh.
Well, even like what Zach said, everything's intentional. So
The
someone
power had been turned
making
off
this
the
game
night we left.
thought that that was an important thing to kind of ground it into more realistic.
For the first time in years,
Well, yeah, I mean, they want you to feel like, I mean, the house is very fantastical, but they do want you to feel like,
I felt like I was home.
for anyone who grew up in kind of a more suburban home or rural home, that you do get a feeling of like, I get the sense that this is similar
But
to my
instead of a
house.
family, they were just memories of one.
When I work with folks that have chaotic households and chaotic families, the first few minutes here is really important. She talked about how the house scared her, and later she's going to talk about the difficulty that she had with both her mom and her great grandma Edie. But she walks into this house for the first time. She said it's the first time in a while she feels like she's been at home. For a lot of folks that have chaotic families, there is this hard pull between not wanting to be in a place which reminds you of bad memories, but then also feeling very strongly at home, still being in that space.
Like how only one restaurant would deliver to our house, so we had Chinese a lot.
I think from a media perspective, what I appreciate is the way that they force perspective throughout this entire. So in terms of if I was teaching a class in any type of video storytelling, I would say look at the way that these angles are built in. Look at the way that the doors are being shown. Basically developing the interior, which absolutely leads to better storytelling.
And the game will guide you in a way, so like when you see the subtitles show up in your environment, it actually does push the camera
The
there.
table was still erect
Okay,
from
so
when I
like right there.
left.
Right,
Yeah.
so that it is
Yeah.
front and center.
So that's going to move. I was moving this way, and basically would move back here. So,
It nudges you for sure.
and as someone that sometimes isn't that comfortable in a controlling environment like this, I think that's very useful because it's an
It was like a
accessibility
bomb had gone off, killing everyone but sparing the furniture. My mom was the only one of us who could imagine Great Grandma Edie living in a nursing home.
Again, foreshadowing.
And great use of sound too. The creaking of the doors. It basically that's something that is hard to teach in television. Thinking about ambient sounds.
Nothing in the house looked abnormal. There was just too much of it, like a smile with too many teeth.
I feel like a lot of older parents and grandparents get to the point where they just ordered and collected
Even
everything.
the fireplace.
I
had
feel like a lot of
story.
us are going to be at that point when we get
And he told
older
me
with
the
all the stuff
bricks
we're
came
buying at
from the
these
original
condos.
house after it sank.
As we get older, I feel like that's me last
I'm
week.
already
Yeah,
I'm
Should
already
see
there.
my office.
Yeah, this has a very remnant of what I would see in my office. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. Which I think is also nice too, because there must be a touchstone for probably everyone that you see in here. Like, oh, the bugs might definitely doesn't resonate with me, but it might resonate with someone else and kind of give them their own
Great
personal
Grandpa
flair.
Sven built a music box for Barbara, along with the rest of the house. Mom always told me to stay out of the basement, so I wasn't too surprised when the key didn't fit.
That was the key from earlier. Does not open the basement. Stairs. Or go there.
I also love those books that are arranged. Look so cool.
Edie told me once that every Finch who ever lived is buried somewhere in the library.
Just a little creepy, don't worry.
Just a tad.
Just there.
Specifically with it, if you look at this door, Shane,
Yep, oh, yeah.
right, you'll notice every door to every bedroom in this house is sealed like this, but with an eye hole in it, which is weird because eye holes, those are only, the peepholes are only supposed to be on the front door of the house, right? So every single bedroom is sealed like this with a peephole.
But you gotta love the book ambiance of that. Alright, so let's go ahead and go up.
After Milton disappeared, Mom sealed up all the bedrooms. Then Edie retaliated and drilled peepholes.
So we are going to look, this is a direct correlation between a grandmother and her granddaughter and the ways that they deal with grief in their family history of trauma. Edie feels that the grief and remembering people needs to be there. You need to see it needs to be respected, it needs to be honored, you need to know that it exists. While Edith's mother is trying to, just like she tried to escape with Edith all those years ago, is trying to seal it up, to pretend that it doesn't exist, and is in a way attempting to
My
run
Grandpa
from her
Sam
grief.
spent 7 years sharing a room with his dead brother, Calvin. As a kid, I just assumed every house had peepholes and sealed rooms you weren't allowed inside of.
Now, not as wild as that, but like we all have things as kids that we kind of thought were normal, and then you talk to your friends, and you're like, you don't do that? That's not something that goes on in your household.
The last time I was in Edith Sr.'s room, I was 10 and she was painting my portrait.
And you can see all the
Molly always seemed
birthdays
like a
and
girl
death
I could
days
imagine
also
being
on
friends
each
with,
door.
if she hadn't died in 1947.
And just even the way they actually put the furniture in the room is absolutely phenomenal. It's very well thought out.
And I usually often think of these as almost like snow globes
Yep,
that are like
that's-
captured in time, so you can kind of contextualize it for that person.
Or you can see like the couches, it would be something I would imagine my grandmother's house. It's something that has, it sort of gets that feel of home. So when you're talking to students, you can say what are the experiences when you go to a grandparent's house, or what's that one piece of furniture that builds a sort of,
I spent a lot of time playing in Great Uncle Walter's room. I think my mom sometimes regretted not sealing it up.
And it's in this room that most of my students
Who
fall
always
in
told
love
me
with the
there were
game.
secret passages
Specifically
that I
right here.
never believed in.
I wonder what.
Turns out, my mom was really good at keeping secrets. Now it was time to find out what my mom had been afraid of.
Right? So you can see that it's a
the
weird,
paintings in
wild
my
house from
head, they're my
outside,
little
but it's like
notebook.
right about now that you are like, oh, okay, so there's a lot more going on here.
Some pretty pictures on the wall. That's lovely.
Yeah, who doesn't love kitty cats?
Oh, hey, let's
Reading this, maybe it sounds like I had a plan, but I had no idea what was behind the door.
What I thought was really interesting is she said reading this. So like
Just like I had
Maybe
no idea
she
where all
is-
this was gonna lead.
something about her perspective or the time that she's saying this stuff.
And now here you kind of learn about what the game is. So this was one of the bedrooms that we saw through the peephole, right? So the game is you're going to be visiting all of the bedrooms of your family members that have passed away to learn about how and why they died. All right? And because of time's sake,
Yeah, I think we're getting.
no, we got time.
Okay, we got
So we're gonna get through the first family member story of Molly. And usually I have them explore around the room a little
December
bit longer,
15th,
but we wanna
1947.
get going.
Dear Diary, I'll be gone soon, but I wanted to tell somebody about what's gonna happen.
Oh my God, this is the first one.
It started when Mom sent me to bed without dinner. I woke up and I was starving, so I looked around for something to eat.
Right? And what's really cool about this
The
game is that
gerbil
each
food was
of these
dry, but I
stories
didn't mind it.
is told through a completely unique perspective. So this one is Molly, and I don't want to spoil anything, so I'll talk a little bit more about Molly right after.
Mom,
This
can I
ends,
come out now?
But a lot of these stories, well, one is told as a comic book. Another one is told through the lens of an old picture camera. Another story is a poem. Another story is told through the imagination of a baby. And each one is completely unique in how it presents like this small vignette of these people passing away.
And there's also changes in art style to some degree as well.
I
So
thought
that
about
could definitely
being
be a touch
Christopher,
point that you
but
can
I
bring
held
to
back.
people playing the game.
And the interesting thing is, especially we're going through Molly now, who was a child. So for her, looking through her eyes as she's having this dream or this nightmare, we're seeing how she is viewing her own death, or how she was viewing the moments before her own death. And it is very childlike. When you
My
get to some
Halloween
of the
candy
adults,
was all gone.
when you get to some of the adults, it's either seen through somebody else's point of view, it's seen through their own point of view. It's seen through the eyes of the people that were with them.
I kept eating and eating.
The common theme in this game will be things of like neglect. Alright, so like when I do have my students write
I ate a lot of
their
things
paper
that
about the
night.
central idea and literary elements, that is one of the things that they've spoken about.
You could talk about also eating toothpaste and berries. Like what might happen. Is that okay?
Then I heard chirping outside my window. It was a barn swallow going back to her nest. I reached out for her. And suddenly, I was a cat.
Now imagine 20 students screaming.
I tried to be quiet, but the bird was really scared.
I love the cat noises.
Mm-hmm.
Here, birdie, 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 birdie.
That's like it.
I think one thing I appreciate is I'm not traditionally good at agility games, so they do make the controls very friendly when it comes to that.
Yeah,
I jumped and I almost got her.
I think this game too, it helps it because the focus is the narrative,
Oh,
not
absolutely.
quick time events or skill-based maneuvering.
Here's the point.
I think you jump on the chair. Almost. I believe in you.
We can do this.
The cat's too fast.
I know. as someone that owns or has has 4 cats, this is pretty normal. Okay.
I don't think it's the chair.
Not there.
Was it the tree then?
Yeah, I think it's climbing up the tree and onto the railing, maybe?
That looks like that. I think
That
that's
might make
Now
sense.
I was
There
up in
we
the
go.
big
15 more
tree.
guys.
Hey.
I promised Dad I wouldn't climb it anymore. All I cared about was eating that mama bird.
you got it.
Nom, nom, nom. There we go.
We
Okay.
lost sound again.
We lost sound again.
Oh, so
Well, now she's an owl. So maybe for a English perspective, you could talk about the symbolism between cat and owls and what they're doing.
pretty much.
What did we do for the sound?
Ah,
There we go.
there we go.
Hey.
Alright, so
Rabbits.
transform from a cat now into an owl. See the words? So the words are showing you where the rabbits are. The controls can be a little difficult during these sections.
For those of you that are trophy hunters like me, there is a trophy for
Yeah.
catching the rabbits.
I think you have to get it
Alright, we
all
got
through
one.
without missing.
Imagine his face looking up and seeing mine through my talons. I
Oh,
swallowed
yeah,
them up,
sorry, eating
and I
live
didn't
animals.
just swim. Then
For the
I
record,
flew
there's a
off
lot of
and
stuff, there's a lot of themes and aspects in this game that if you're queasy about something, just a heads up, it may or may not happen.
a mama rabbit.
You got it.
There it is.
Nice.
She was almost too big to carry. I started choking, but I couldn't stop eating. And suddenly,
My
I
favorite
was a
part.
shark.
My favorite part of the game right here. Now imagine 20 students screaming. Okay?
It's giving me major man-eater vibes. That Xbox and PlayStation game. Just a shark flopping around.
I rolled off a cliff and
Now,
into
luckily,
the
my
ocean.
admin didn't come in during this particular scene because there might be some questions.
I wanted fat, juicy seals.
They're there. I promise.
Where is it? There it is. There it is.
Ah,
We're very close. Right there.
you're really right on top of it. Oh,
Come on!
you just missed him. To the right. Or not.
That was left.
It's okay, we don't want to kill the seal.
Yeah, I'm okay with not killing it, to be honest, but... Oh, there we go.
Well, something that I thought was really cool is the child is internalizing a monologue of the animal.
Tore off her flipper and it tasted really good.
So, me as a human, I might not want to eat a baby seal, but me as a shark, probably want to eat a baby seal.
Totally amazing. There he is.
Grabbed on tight. I was so hungry, I jumped out of the water. When I opened my eyes, everything had changed.
Now we're just a sea monster.
Now I was a monster, and I I smelled people everywhere.
And then we're brought back to get the word again.
Try.
You got it, man.
I was big and moved real quiet. I wanted to stop, but also I didn't. After the last passenger, I was still hungry. Across the water, I saw something new, something I had to have, so I swam towards it. I slithered onto the sand, and the good smell went into an old pipe.
Does anyone recognize where we are?
I got closer and closer. All of my stomach started growling. And suddenly, I was me again. I held my breath for a long time, but I couldn't hear anything. I think it's waiting for me to fall asleep. But it's not going to wait much longer. It needs to be, and we both know I will be delicious.
So one of the sad things about this game is that some of these stories are fantastical.
I'm not sure if I believed all of that, but I'm sure Edie would have.
Like this. But this is a young girl that went to
I
bed
got
without
the sense
dinner.
Edie had spent
and-
a lot of time here.
And you kind of
Before
get
my mom
the
sealed the
idea
doors.
based on the beginning part of the stories that she actually ended up poisoning herself, eating something she shouldn't have. And the depth of Edie's guilt is one of the reasons why she just left the room entirely untouched. Like her last night there.
Right. So that's one example of the how many stories? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So there's 12 of these vignettes total in the game. And with each one, I would have different conversations around what the literary elements, rhetorical devices, or themes that we see in each of these stories. They're all completely unique, which is really cool because it keeps things fresh throughout the whole game. And I recommend, even if you're not a teacher, I recommend playing this game. It's just really, really wonderful. If you are a teacher, try it. If it can fit into one of your classes. If not, I got 46 other activities for you on Hey Listen Games between social studies, social emotional learning, ELA, some science, and Harry's going to get us some math in the future, finally. So thank you, Harry.
Yay.
All right. And with that, we're going to bring the panel to a close. So these are different ways that you can reach out to us. So once again, on Twitter, I'm at HeyListenGames_. I respond very frequently on Twitter. That's probably the fastest way to get in contact with me. Don't forget the underscore at the end. That's very important. All right. And then my website is heylistenggames.org. Again, all of my curriculum there is free to download. But I do have a Patreon if anyone would like to support. That's always more than welcome, but no pressure at all. And then every Wednesday I stream on twitch.tv/geekslikeus with the Geeks Like Us crew. Harry.
And yeah, you could, sorry. And you can check me out on Twitter and all other social medias at illgrillchill, ILLGRILLCHILL, as well as checking out my written work on 6-1 Indie, which, like I said, is just a website that amplifies the voice of indie games.
And I am Wandering Shrink pretty much everywhere throughout the internet. I do stream with Geeks Like Us too. It's either me playing Bloodborne and screaming constantly, or it's normally something about the psychology of certain games. If you want to reach out, if you're either a therapist or if you work in some kind of therapeutic setting, even if it's just like, you know, working with kids one-on-one, games are so healthy and games can be used in so many ways. This game alone can help a lot of people process through their own trauma, grief, or familial issues, just because it helps us feel less alone. So feel free to reach out to me if any of you ever want to talk about that.
And very quickly, I am SILNAN basically on all social media. I have a website, Shane Tilton, and I'm going to be down at the Geek Therapeutics booth if you want to talk to me after this panel. So, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
And thank you to the tech crew and my tech support. And once again, I'm sorry I can't stick around. I need to boogie right now.
Get out.
Bye, everyone.